Okay. Our next item is we have Jeff Hogan here from the Southwestern Integrated Fiber Technology Network. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you again. I'll just wait for my PowerPoint to get loaded there. Keep me on track. Make sure my buttons are working, and they are. Look at that. Okay. As the Warden mentioned, Jeff Hogan, I've been seconded from Grey County in my role as IT Director to become the Executive Director of SWIFT for a year. And I started back in October. And we've been doing a lot of work since October, to the point where we're actually releasing our first request for pre-qualification document into the market next Friday. So that's a major milestone for SWIFT that's coming up on Friday. So thanks for having me, and thanks for being part of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus that started this entire project. So very important project for the region. So since the last time I was here, the biggest news, of course, is that we got $180 million worth of federal and provincial funding to help fund the project. And we've also had some talks with our funders about the overall cost of the project. And we've always talked about $270 million, because that's the federal, provincial, and private sector, and our municipal contribution was included in the private sector contribution. But we're now hoping to get more than $90 million from the private sector, so we actually can spend a little bit more money on fiber, including our municipal contribution. So it's a $288 million project, and I usually round that up to about $300 million, just for round figures' sake. We're very thankful that the federal and provincial governments stepped up to help with the project. Just a bit of context, our goal is to get fiber to every home, business, and farm in southwestern Ontario, and that's a $4 billion problem, not $300 million. $300 million is a good start, and it's going to give us a connected system that can be built upon to reach our $4 billion goal. But I think it's incumbent on all of us, as whether we're SWIFT or Bruce County or Grey County or the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, to keep lobbying our federal government to remember our rural areas, that those farms are some of the most technologically advanced in businesses going, and they need connectivity to be able to succeed in their new economy of the Internet of Things and the knowledge-based economy. So what is SWIFT funding with this project? We are funding fiber only. Okay, we're called Southwestern Integrated Fiber Technology for a reason. And the reason for that is that we have guiding principles, and one of those guiding principles is that we need to be scalable. So we do not want to invest any public sector funds on any infrastructure that doesn't have a long-term life and is scalable to meet future demand. So we're going to build our backbone network, which is that square box, the rectangular box at the bottom, and we'll fund things like fiber to the home, or fiber to the business, or fiber to the cabinet, or fiber to the node. Those are terms of the industry. But we'll also fund fiber to the base of a tower. We're not going to fund the provider's tower. We're not going to fund the provider's gear that goes on the tower. But if they need a piece of fiber that goes to the base of the tower, we're happy to fund that if there's money left over. So it's a fiber project, and I'll explain a little bit further down the presentation why that's important. Every piece of fiber that SWIFT funds is going to be open access. This is we got this photo from a company in the States. I really think it speaks volumes. So we don't build roads, one road for UPS and one road for FedEx. We build one road that's owned by the municipality, that's open access. That road is available to everybody equally, okay? Currently in the telecom infrastructure world in southwestern Ontario, or in Canada in general, when a provider builds a piece of fiber, which is the road that the data moves across, whether that's the internet or site-to-site connectivity for you at the county here between your long-term care facilities and your head office, that piece of fiber is owned by that provider, and they get to choose whether they let FedEx drive on that road. It's their choice. It's not open access. So every piece of fiber we are going to fund, is a requirement of it will be that the provider who builds it cannot block any other provider from using it. And that's really important, because the $4 billion problem is one piece of fiber to every single home, business, and farm. If you want competition, you want to make sure that you don't want to spend another $4 billion to put a second piece of fiber into everybody's home. You want to be able to use that one piece of fiber and deliver services across it. When you think about technology today, just like the two different companies are delivering packages across an open access municipal road, service providers can provide an internet service or a television service or a phone service or a Netflix service or a home education service, et cetera, et cetera. We want to make sure that it's not just the provider who owns the piece of fiber that delivers those services. So that's what open access means in short terms. Where are we? So I should take the word target off of May 12th because we had a team meeting this morning, and we are going to be releasing that document on May 12th, which is fantastic. So what that's doing is we have 3 phases to the first part of the project. Issuing an RFPQ, which is a request for pre-qualification, and that document is going to ask the providers to provide us with all of the fiber infrastructure in the region. For Bruce County's stake, that would mean that Whiteman, Bruce Telecom, Bell, Hurontel, and some of the smaller wireless companies have now got some fiber in the ground. They're all going to provide us fiber maps back, and we're going to collect that under non-disclosure agreements, so we don't obviously share it with their competitors, but it gives the SWIFT team the ability to look at Bruce County and all the other regions and say, where are the gaps? Where is there fiber and where is there not fiber? So when we release our RFPs, we try to build fiber where there is no fiber and leverage the existing fiber. That's the goal. We want to increase the fiber diffusion throughout the region, and the only way the providers are going to give us this data is if we tell them, if you don't provide it, you can't bid on RFPs. So that's what we're going to do. So in that situation, all the providers have said they're going to participate. So that's a big deal. Nobody has this data, not even the CRTC. They have approximate locations of things. We're going to have maps, stick it in a GIS system and actually be able to analyze the data. So that's phase 1. That's going to take until about October, until we've analyzed all that data and come up with a construction plan, and then we release RFPs into the market. So that's Q4 of 2017. That's going to take 3 to 4 months to get through the marketing, be in the marketplace. So early 2018, we're going to start signing contracts with the providers. So it's really not until early 2018 that we're going to have the ability to say to the counties and the other partners in the project, this is what's getting built where and when. Because until we've signed the bottom line with the providers, we can't give you that information. We don't know it ourselves. Because frankly, until we do the RFPQ, we don't even know where the real gaps are, right? So once again, this is we've got a very well thought out project, and we're going to be able to report back to you on a semi-annual basis to let you know how that's going. Do you have a question, Kelly?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Warden, if I can just ask a question at this juncture. Given that, Jeff, is there a philosophy that SWIFT's developed in terms of what you envision as approach for the construction? So you may not know what needs to be constructed and where it needs to be constructed, but do you have a philosophy that says Bruce County Peninsula is as important as Lakeshore community in Southwest?
Yep. Absolutely. And the upcoming slides are going to speak directly to that.
I think, Jeff, Robert, you had something that you wanted to ask? No, you. Oh, okay, sorry.
And so we're going to build the network, and then the last part of this is that the $300 million project is a 5-year project, and we're already 6 to 9 months into that project. So at the end of the 5 years, this network will be up and running. The providers are going to be providing services to folks. And any provider that's been funded by us is going to have to pay us back a small residual. So as they connect customers and start charging for services, as an example, if hopefully my house gets a fiber connection, I'll pay the provider, let's say, about $150 a month, but for that I will get phone, television, and internet. And that'll be a gig internet, up and down, not the 15 megs and the 1 meg up I have now that I pay $125 a month for. So they're going to charge me $150. the provider's going to give SWIFT back, let's say $3 of that. Every connection's going to pay SWIFT back $3, and at every annual, let's say annually, the board is going to go, okay, we've got a reasonable sized capital pot again. We're going to ask the federal and provincial governments to top that pot up, and then we're going to go back to RFP and continue to incent the providers to build further and further down each concession road until everyone's connected. So our plan includes this broadband development fund, which is that residual payment, that's going to get the job done over time. And that's part of the plan. And without that, this is just a single point in time. We're going to help X amount of people, but we're not going to solve the problem. This plan solves the problem in the long term. So who makes those decisions? We have a board of directors. SWIFT is a not-for-profit, non-share capital corporation. Because you are members of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus who started this project, but since then, Niagara, Caledon, Waterloo, and a bunch of other folks have joined on. In fact, Waterloo just passed their council meeting last night that they're contributing $2.2 million to the project and have joined on as a full partner, the same as the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus members. So that not-for-profit, non-share capital corporation is governed by a board of directors, 8 of which, including your own warden, is one of those board members, is appointed by the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. So in a 15-member board, de facto, the Western Ontario Wardens still have control of the board. Of course, that's only if they're all there, because every single person on that board has an equal vote. The other contributing members, i.e. the Waterloos, Niagaras, and Caledons of the world, they vote for the other 2 municipal seats. And then we have 5 seats that are brought from our members at large, and we really would like to maintain a structure of someone from the school board, someone from the college, someone from the private sector, someone from the OFA to represent agriculture, and a First Nation seat. So that's the goal, to keep that layout of the board, okay? And those folks make the decisions about who gets built when, where it gets built, based on a lot of information, of course, that staff is going to give them to make these decisions based on. Okay, so that's how the decision making gets done. So SWIFT and the board has, and the Western Ontario Wardens have adopted these guiding principles, and we've talked about these guiding principles in previous presentations, but the one I want to bring your attention to today most importantly is ubiquity and equitability. That is one of the guiding principles of the corporation and of the board, and one of the questions that comes up from all the partners, and you're included in that, who gets built first, and does that very low density area in the peninsula get treated the same way as the high density area in the lakeshore? Well, our guiding principles are ubiquity and equitability. The private sector is already, and a great example is Walkerton and Hanover, where Eastlink and Whiteman are providing really great internet services in your community. But that's only happening in the dense urban area where they have a business case. There's enough houses per square kilometer that they can make an investment and not ask for a large installation fee and make a profit. That's their job. They're there to make a profit. So the reason the SWIFT project is here is that we can use the public sector money to incent that private sector to build outside the boundaries of these urban areas where they have a business case. So our idea is that if you live on the 3rd line at the 5th concession, you should get the same services and the same price as someone in downtown Walkerton. That's the end goal of the project, and we want to approach that with that spirit in mind, so that when the first part of the project is over, there is equal access throughout the region. And that includes within the boundaries of a county, as well as within the boundaries of the region. Now, I have a slide upcoming that talks about your input on that as a council and as an organization, so I'll come to that in a minute. This slide just explains the timeline in a more with dates assigned, just for your reference. We've already talked about that in that phased slide, but the RFPs are being released in October timeframe, and we'll start building next year. So how do we do this, and how does this accomplish? So this is just a photo of a typical rural area, and they have schools, they have municipal sites, they have hospital sites, and lots of folks in between with farms, etc. And in that area, there's typically bits of fiber here and there, and Walkerton and Hanover are a great example. There's Hamilton, there's fiber in Walkerton, there's fiber in Hanover, there's fiber between the two, but the houses between the two urban areas are not really well connected, right? So what SWIFT is going to do is we're going to learn about where all the fiber is. We're going to look at all the public sector sites. We're going to install points of presence in places that a provider wouldn't normally do because the business case doesn't make sense. And then we're going to connect those points of presence with fiber. So this looks more like a highway. This looks like a road network, right? It's not actually there's not a driveway into every farm. And we just don't have the money yet to put a piece of fiber down every driveway, right? But this fiber that goes along the roads, this fiber is put in a different way than the fiber is today. Or I should say, today they're doing it already, the private sector. But in the past, Bell, for instance, would connect Hanover and Walkerton together with fiber, but they never dreamt that they would actually use fiber to connect people's homes. They didn't think it would ever happen. So there's only 16 pieces of fiber between Hanover and Walkerton. That's called transport fiber. Well, the fiber we put in is going to have 400 strands of fiber in it, so that we can break those fibers out along the route and start connecting people. And there's a business case for the private sector to do that because they're now close enough to the closest piece of accessible fiber that they'll start filling it in. And in the short term, these wireless providers will get fiber connected to the base of their towers. So a lot of folks in the rural areas connect with wireless systems, either satellite or terrestrial wireless. I'm one of them. I have terrestrial wireless in my house. My system sometimes goes slower and sometimes goes faster based on the time of day and how many kids are home from school and things like that. Well, if we connect fiber to the base of every tower, my wireless connection is going to be a lot better in the short term until we get to the next phase of the project where we can finish the job and get fiber into my house. So this is phase one. We put the fiber in, the private sector helps connect connections along that fiber, and the wireless providers with their own money are going to fill in the gaps with better connected towers. So what that looks like is that we're going to have a network that connects back to Toronto throughout the entire region, right to the tip of Tobermory, Windsor, Niagara Falls, and everything in between. That's the goal, with a goal of $100 a month for a gig connection, just like they have in downtown Toronto today. Well, downtown Toronto, it's $70 a month for a gig connection. I don't know what Whiteman charges here for a gig. I haven't looked. Maybe it's that cheap. I don't know. So this is a slide that just explains that to a little bit more sort of granular degree. So that's an Owen Sound pop, a Meaford pop, and a Thornbury pop. And there's a piece of fiber that runs between those that we funded. Well, we put a splice point in every 1,500 meters that any provider who wants to can break out of that fiber and start connecting a small community, a tower, a large commercial site, etc. That all gets connected along those pieces of fiber that get put in. Okay, so that's the idea. And what happens is the Broadband Development Fund starts generating funds, and the board every year goes back to the market and does more RFPs and says we want another pop here with fiber connecting it. We want another pop here with fiber connecting it. Until that we've got everyone connected to the point where down the road, maybe that fund could even help fund longer driveways and things like that. So what does that look like? So back to the map we just did, what we do is we add more and more fibers in between until there's a business case for the private sector to actually connect everything with fiber. Okay, so that's our plan and the way we plan to approach the project. So what can Bruce County do? So your planning department and your economic development department, they're the ones who know where you want growth to happen in the county, where you've got particular businesses that need help. We're going to get a lot of input from your local staff so that all this data can be put into our GIS systems and in our mapping things so that when we provide a plan to the board, it's got local input. Okay? We would like you guys to promote our user survey, which is launching any moment now. And we're going to start talking about local permitting requirements when we actually have more time to think about that thing. And if you have any large multi-site companies in the area that may want to add their sites to the RFP, pass those numbers on, or those contact information on. So we have asked you to sign a municipal capital agreement. The Western Ontario Wardens Caucus back in 2015 agreed on a formula for the partners to provide funding to the project. Your total was $860,092. And we have this idea of a refundable and a non-refundable portion of the contribution. And you get to choose when you sign that agreement whether you want that money back or not, or you get to decide in the future whether you want that money back or not. We are hoping, and we've already gotten a number of these back, and sort of about half and half so far. Half the counties have said, we don't want the money back, and half the counties have said, yeah, we want some of this money back, or we want the ability to choose whether we get that money back in year 6 rather than in year 1. This agreement hasn't come into front of you yet. I think Kelly has said that it's coming in June. So this is just an explanation of what that agreement's going to look like. So we are now asking to be due in 2017 3/5 of the payment, because the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus agreed that in 2015 we were supposed to get funded in 2015, right? We didn't get funded till 2016. So that's when the caucus decided that this money should be due. Because of my relationship, working for Grey County, I know that Grey County started putting that money away in 2015 and put it in reserve every year that the SWIFT didn't ask for it. So they just passed last Thursday to provide the funds and waive the refundable portion. Now let me talk about that refundable portion for a second. That was put in place because some of the partners of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus were really badly affected back in 2014 by the OMPF changes. And they said they really wanted to participate in the project, but they just didn't have the money. So this is why this refundable and non-refundable portion was conceived by the caucus in the first place. Most of the partners in their own heads, the CAOs, said, we're never going to get this money back, and we really don't want it back. And the reason is this. So we build a $288 million project. We start collecting broadband development funds from the providers. And in year 6, which is the first year that the network's been operating for a year, we have a certain value of money. That money is meant to go back to incent more building of fiber to be done. It's that, or we pay you back your refundable portion. We can't do both because we only have one pot of money to pay this money back from. So the regions that choose to get their money refunded during the time until their money is fully refunded will not have any more infrastructure built in their region. That's their choice if they need the money back. Our recommendation is leave the money in and let us incent the private sector continue building more infrastructure in your region. So again, that's a choice you as council get to make, and that there's a little tick box on the agreement your clerk and warden either get to choose to tick or not, or council gets to choose and they get to execute on your behalf. There may be questions on that. I don't know. No? Okay. How are we doing the RFPs? So when our request for pre-qualification is done, and we know where all the fiber is, we want to make sure that smaller providers, and you've got 2 of them in your area, or 3 or 4 actually, Huron-Tel, Bruce Telecom, Whiteman, and Bell are your major players in your region. We want to make sure that a company like Bruce Telecom has the ability to compete fairly with Bell Canada. They obviously are completely different scales, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to size the geographic regions of the RFPs so that the smaller providers have every chance of winning against a company like Bell. We're not going to stack it in favor completely of the smaller incumbent, because there has to be competition, because that's how we get the price down and the service quality up, because this is really about driving competition. So that's how we're going to make sure that the smaller providers are able and capable of providing bids on our service. And frankly, we think that the smaller providers are going to be the ones that are going to fill in those really rural gaps. The Bells, Rogers, and Cogicos of the world are always going to be focused on the Torontos, the Londons, the Kitcheners of the world, and not, you know, the fourth line in South Bruce Peninsula. So we want to make sure that those smaller providers are capable of bidding. So how are we going to incent the providers to do this? Well, we've got subsidy, right? So if they build $1 million worth of infrastructure, we're going to subsidize them $666,000. So they're building infrastructure with 33 cents. So that's a great incentive, right? Well, there are some areas that are such low density that that may not be enough incentive for them to bid. So what we're doing is, in each of these geographic zones, we're going to include some high density, like a Walkerton, for instance, some low density, like the surrounding areas, and we're going to request that you, as Bruce County, add all of your sites that you already have connected to services. Like, you have to connect your long-term care facilities, you have to connect your roads, garages, you have to connect your ambulance bases, you have to connect all of those things, come back to this building to access payroll, HR, all those functions. We're going to ask you to include your sites in the project. We're going to ask the hospital sector to include their sites, the school board sector to include their sites, so that there's revenue associated with the RFP on the table. And the reason that that's important is the incumbents who currently own the infrastructure in this area and have the connections to yourselves, the hospitals and the schools, have a distinct advantage over non-incumbents because they have more infrastructure in the ground. So it's cheaper for them to add a customer than someone who has no infrastructure. But if we add a lot of revenue into the RFP potential, those non-incumbents actually have a business case to bid. And that's how we increase the bid tension and decrease the prices that we're going to get. So, for instance, if we do a Bruce County and chuck it up into 3 or 4 zones, and only Bell Canada bids, and they see on the bidders list that they're the only ones who are going to bid, where do you think their price is going to be? When there's 6 or 8 companies bidding, they're going to have to sharpen their pencil. So that's how we're going to really drive the value of the public dollars that we're spending in this project. So the point I'm trying to make is the revenue from the sites allows the non-incumbent providers to bid on the project much more effectively than when they do, if there was no revenue on the table. You have some specific questions that I brought some answers to. I didn't actually put the questions up there, I just put the answers. I'll have to think if I have the questions. Well, I have the questions in front of me, but I'm not sure how they all relate. I should have numbered them, I apologize for that. So you asked somewhere about when the 5-year period of the project began. Really, so the funding period of the project began in 2015, when the caucus agreed to fund the project. The project began from the government's perspective on July the 10th, 2016, because that's the day we got our funding announcement. Okay, so that's what the 5-year, so our 5-year build window ends 5 years post July 2016, but we're asking for the funding quicker than that because the way these projects work is we have to pay the provider and then the government repays us, so there needs to be money in SWIFT's bank account for cash flow, and that's being provided by the municipal sector. The refundable portion, when does it start getting paid back? In year 6, 2022. And I made this point already. The BDF, the Broadband Development Fund that gets collected from the providers, can either be used to invest in new fiber or pay back the refundable portion to each partner. Now, when that refundable portion is completely paid back, we will continue to invest in your community, but there'll be that hiatus period while we're paying you back. Partner withdrawal, there's a question around this. So we have a clause in the agreement that says if a partner drops out, we may ask for some more funding from you guys. So this is not a done deal. So we have a contribution agreement with the province that says if the partners change from who originally applied for the money, we need to have a conversation about scope of the project. So the board will have the choice. Let's say, for instance, that Huron County decides they're out of the project. The board needs to decide, are we going to build around Huron County and reduce the amount of money we get from the provincial and federal governments? Or are we going to ask our existing partners for more funds to do the build in Huron anyway? I sense where the board would go with this, and my expectation is that there will never be more money to be asked for, but if we don't put a clause in the contract that allows us to make that decision at the time, we won't meet the terms of the contribution agreement with the province. Okay, so that's a bit of legalese. The build schedule, that was partly the Lakeshore Northern Bruce Peninsula question, but it's also to do with, when you looked back at the map that connects Toronto up to Tobermory, there's, the network's built very much like a road system. You have to have a 400 series highway with very few exits that's really can move traffic quickly, that then connects to a county road that has slightly more exits, then that connects to a feeder road that has every driveway off of it. A network's built exactly the same way as a road system or a water system. So we have to establish where the 400 series highways are going to be built before we can RFP the access roads. We don't have to build it first, but we at least need to close that RFP. So once the core RFP is closed and the provider starts building, we will then issue the access RFPs, close those. All of this infrastructure gets built in parallel. Who gets built first, Lambton or Bruce, right? Good question. Well, because we're breaking the project up into these geographic zones, there's about, I would say, a maximum of about 30 companies that can bid on this work. But all 30 companies aren't doing business in every zone of the SWIFT project area. So there's probably 6 or 7 companies that can bid in Bruce County. And there's 6 or 7 companies in Lambton that can bid, but only 2 or 3 of them overlap. So there's actually enough capacity that we can be building in Bruce, Lambton, Wellington, and Essex all at the same time by different companies. So it's not that we have to choose to do one jurisdiction first. It all happens in parallel. And otherwise, we'd never get the network built in the 5-year period. There's 30,000 route kilometers of fiber. It takes a long time to build. So that's how the build schedule is going to work. Someone asked what the administration value is. We're targeting between 5 to 7% of total. The EORN project, the Eastern Ontario Regional Network that was done by the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, they ended up at about 5%. Our project is somewhat more complex with the idea of BDF and the way we're doing the procurements. We may have to end up spending a little bit more, but as I keep telling the team, every dollar we spend on anything but fiber is not what we want. We're going to save every dollar we can to spend it on fiber in the ground, not on consulting, etc. So the last mile, do we invest in last mile technologies? Not for homes, certainly in phase 1, but if there's a tower that needs to be connected or a large school site that's really important to the community to get connected, or a large business park that is critical to a county's success, that may be funded in phase 1. It'll all depend on how much money is left over when we get to the RFP stage. But every piece of fiber we put in has breakouts every 1.5 kilometers, so it can be used by the private sector to connect to people alongside the fiber. The last mile will be directly subsidized over time with broadband development funds, but that is down the road, and it really comes back to my first comment I made about the federal government and how much money they're putting towards these projects. We as rural municipal structures really need to make our voice heard in Ottawa about funding for this technology. So you asked for a return on investment calculation. So we have $18 million approximately of municipal funds in a $288 million project, which is approximately a 16-to-1 return. That doesn't mean there's going to be a 16-to-1 return within the walls of Bruce County, because our core and aggregation network, which benefits Bruce County, isn't necessarily built in Bruce County, but The 400 series highway doesn't come to Walkerton, but you need that 400 series highway to get the goods to Walkerton. It's the same idea. So we estimate that the core and aggregation is about 80 million. So there's about 180 million left for the 18 partners. So $8 to $10 million of infrastructure build within the walls of Bruce County is what I'm estimating. But again, until our procurements are complete, we can't tell you that. When the RFPs are signed and the master services agreements are signed, we'll know those numbers. So just numbers for you with respect to the original contributions, just to give you an idea. Simcoe County is the big one in the room because of their size, population, etc. I think Brant is the smallest. Where's Brant? 346, yeah. So these are the contributions to the project. Those are the original partners. And this was based on a formula that the caucus approved of back in 2015. The other partner contributions, so Waterloo, the 2.23 million is now official as of yesterday. Niagara's official, Caledon's official, the Western Wardens are official except for a couple of outliers that we're going to clean up in the next month or two. And we are working on the rest of the separated cities because we think it's important that the entire municipal sector in the region works together to show a united front with the providers to say, we're very serious about this project and we want you to follow our open access rules. So it's important to get the separated cities involved. Aurelia is already involved with a financial contribution of $78,000. So, this is my last slide. Why should Bruce County participate in SWIFT? We're the only program that currently has funding. And when you think about the Connect to Innovate project that the federal government launched that just closed in the last 2 weeks, that's a $500 million federal contribution over 5 years for all of Canada. We have $180 million just for southwestern Ontario, and it's just a start. So that's the size of the problem. And again, I can't emphasize enough, I think it's incumbent upon us to really do a good job, maybe at the Western Wardens level, et cetera, to start getting the feds to say, remember us, the people who feed you? So anyway, that's that. We're a very well thought out plan. We've spent 5 years putting this thing together, and we've had 2 positive third-party reviews that really spoke very highly of our project. This is an important point, I think. So we're scaled to hire people. So you asked about the administration overhead of the project. Well, 5% of 300 million buys a lot of good advice. 5% of a small project in Bruce County doesn't get you enough advice to really do a good job, right? So participating in a regional project like this really makes a lot of sense when it comes to scale and hiring the right folks. We're sustainable over time with the Broadband Development Fund. The broader public sector working together will get the best pricing for the partners. And the project is targeted to improve all areas of Bruce County, including the small incumbent local exchange carrier territory, which would be Huron and Bruce Tell, and actually Whiteman is not Silac territory here, and the Bell territory. So actually I should have added Eastlink there because the whole peninsula is Eastlink. So I think that's the end of my specific points of view that I wanted to get across, and then open it up to questions, Mr. Wardy.
Good, thank you, Jeff. Questions, comments? Milt?
Thank you, Jeff. Just on that last mile, and of course in rural, where we are in the peninsula, that is a concern of mine. And so you don't build the last mile until those PDF funds, or whatever you call them, start to accumulate or show up?
Correct.
So a company, a private company, if they said, well, it's questionable at best whether I can make a profit on this, so we're going to wait until those funds perhaps show up. So what is the incentive if there is, you know, if the funds may show up, why wouldn't they wait until they show up?
It's an excellent question. So the first part of the answer is the way that we're going to structure the RFPs. So when we do an RFP for geographic region, let's use the peninsula as an example. So there'll be Tobermory, Wyerton, Lions Head will be included in the RFP. So those are those urban areas that are more interesting to the providers. And then there'll be lots of low-density trees in between. We're going to incent them to do that. We're going to give them a 66% subsidy. We're going to create these wires that have the ability to be broken out of, which don't exist today. So when Amtelecom built the DSL, which is pretty good up at on the peninsula, they put fiber in to connect to a piece of copper, and the copper would distribute it. They never thought that that piece of fiber would have 300 connections off of it between point A and point B. So we're going to replace that fiber. It needs to be replaced with the right kind of fiber for that. And then everything's now open access. So if a smaller company, let's say like GBTEL, that's currently mostly a wireless provider, they're now building fiber-based projects in smaller areas and connecting it with backhaul with wireless back to their closest place they have fiber. Those are the kinds of companies that may step in and start building off of the Eastlink fiber because they have these large public companies like Eastlink's, Bell, et cetera. They have basically, if they can't get a return on their investment in 3 years, they don't build it. These smaller companies have the ability sometimes to say, maybe we'll take a little bit of a longer view at this. And then there may be other incentive programs. So I'll just digress for a second. The other counties are now starting to look at how do we solve this problem. Huron County, when I was there doing this exact same presentation, the ComCentric group gave a proposal to council that said, we think it's going to cost $35 million to do the rest of Huron County with fiber. We're going to apply to CTI for $7 million, and we want you to match that. We want you to provide us $7 million worth of funding, and then we will get this done in 7 or 8 years. Council, much to my surprise, voted in favor, in principle, of giving them $7 million, and they were going to raise the money by adding a 2% levy, 2% special charge to the levy to collect money for broadband. Caledon has done this already. That went through in their last budget. They've passed a 0.5% levy charge that everyone's contributing 0.5% to help do broadband. Lambton County is talking about subsidizing. So if I'm a farmer and my house is way set back or my barn is way set back from the road and there's this huge installation cost to get in from the road, that the provider normally would come to the farmer and say, pay me that money. The Lambton's considering having a fund that the farmer can come to Lambton County, borrow the money, and pay it back over time against their taxes, their property taxes. Their property taxes would go up a little bit to pay back that money. So there's all kinds of interesting strategies that I think we're all going to have to start looking at as municipal councils to help make this happen quicker, because if SWIFT doesn't get more money, this may take 20 years to get everyone connected. I can't possibly survive another 20 years without fiber in my house in Grey Highlands, right? So if the federal government is going to step up, that's great, because it's really their responsibility, but they don't always meet all their responsibilities, I've found. So we, as the local level, may have to come up with strategies that make that work. And it's obviously not a core service that a county is supposed to provide, but Huron County, it was a unanimous decision. Every councillor thought this is so important to the economic development of our region that we're willing to take a political risk and put 2% an extra tax on to raise the money to do this. So this is what's happening. So if we use programs like that, and you tie it back to the SWIFT system where everything is open access and the provider who owns the fiber can't block another provider to connect, we've got the building blocks to really, bring Southwestern Ontario up to a level that's could work.
Jeff, so the 300 million you spoke of, so that is going to be spent within a 5-year period?
Correct.
Okay.
So that slide there, that network with all those yellow points of presence and all the fiber in between them, that's 4.5 years from now, because we've already elapsed 6 months.
Yeah, good,
So.
thank you.
Other comments, questions? Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Warden, one question about the refundable portion. Can a community ask that refundable portion be designated to their community? So if they waive to have it returned to them, can they say, we're requesting that money go to our local community first?
So the reason we haven't put language like that into the agreement is that all of our RFPs will be structured to have some urban, some rural, some public sector sites to make it attractive for the providers to bid. And the reason we want to subsidize the providers a little bit in the rural, in the urban areas is because they're going to connect more customers more quickly there, and they're going to generate more broadband development funds. So when we connect the city of Barrie and the city of Kitchener and the city of London and start getting broadband development funds, and we wrote into the contract that all those funds would be spent within the walls of that municipality, it's to the detriment of the rural municipalities. So we've left it specifically open to give the board the ability to make those decisions at the time they need to make those decisions. It's such a complex task to look in the future with this that we wanted to make this agreement somewhat loose, to be frank, to give the board that is frankly you the ability to make those decisions in the future.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Okay, action items. A, Code of Conduct for Members of Council. You have had an opportunity to see the attachment. There is a recommendation. I need a mover and seconder. Moved by Mike, seconded by Milt. Are there any discussions on that staff recommendation? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to let council know that I mentioned in my report that Bill 68 did receive second reading on March 23rd, and as of yesterday, it was ordered for third reading. So I just wanted to update you on that.
Okay, thank you. I think we all know where it's going to end up. Okay. Next, the Integrity Commissioner. Okay, you've had an opportunity to read the recommendation for the Integrity Commissioner. Do I have a mover and seconder for that recommendation? Robert? Mike? Are there any discussions on that recommendation? And again, just for clarification, our local municipalities as well will have just one Integrity Commissioner. That's the design of this, correct? Instead of having 9 Integrity Commissioners. Any other comments, discussions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Fees and charges bylaw amendment. There is a staff recommendation. Do I have a mover and seconder? Mike? Paul? Are there any further discussions on the staff recommendation? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. All right, next item of business is the Bruce County 150th celebration update. Anne Marie.
Good morning, Warden Tour, Council. Thank you for having us here today.
I don't see it on there.
I don't see it on here either.
It must be a separate report.
Sorry. So I'm here to provide an update to you on our work with the Bruce 150 committee. We've been moving forward, so we do...
Should have put that on there.
Pardon me. We do have our merchandise available here at the administration building, as well as at the Bruce County Museum, and it will also be available at the outreach trailer when it goes out to events across the county, and we have started selling that material. Our fun spiel at the Port Elgin Curling Club was a lot of fun. We had 6 teams playing for prizes, and we had a wide range of ages and abilities playing at that event. The trailer, it has been at the Wyerton Willie festivities, as well as the Saugeen Bluffs Maple Syrup Festival, and we'll be going out to a number of events this summer, and that list is actually growing. We enjoyed our Tartan Day fun. I saw you had your Bruce County tartan tie on, and I was wearing my scarf that day. We had some people all out in their kilts, and so it was really great. And we actually had a participant from Nova Scotia, and it was he who won the prize pack of Bruce 150 gear with his Nova Scotia tartan salmon. I would like to thank all of the mayors for leading the tree planting ceremonies within your municipalities. So the trees were gifted to each municipality, and they were planted with a small ceremony at 11 a.m. on April 21st. There was a plaque made of Aramosa stone installed with each tree, and we're very grateful to the municipal staff who assisted in making those ceremonies and tree plantings take place. Here we have Dave Mary Inglis planting the tree at the Bruce Power Regional Soccer Park here in Walkerton. So upcoming, we have Bruce Remembers, which is a military reunion dinner. Tickets are available for sale here at the Administration Center and at the museum, and we're working on getting them out to the municipal offices in areas outside of Brockton and Saugeen Shores. So the event will bring the past alive with a celebratory dinner and entertainment to honor the 32nd Bruce Regiment, the 160th, the 97th and 98th Anti-Tank Batteries, and all the men and women who've served our county and country over the generations. So tickets for that event are $50, and veteran tickets are available at no charge here at the Admin Center as well as at the museum. And Bruce Power has sponsored that particular event. Doors open. We've had a wonderful committee put together with representatives from across the county. We have 46 sites, and they can all be viewed at bruce150.ca or also on the Doors Open Ontario website. They're not all up on the Doors Open Ontario website yet, but they are up on our website now. So we're really looking forward to that event. It's a free event, and the locations have parts or all of their facilities open for people to go through them over the course of the weekend. We're very excited to be working with Phil Englishman and his committee to help make the Canadian Forces Snowbirds presentation happen on June 21st. And that presentation will take place at 6 p.m., but the doors will open at the airport at noon for people to go in and view some of the planes that they have coming in and some other activities they have going on. They're still confirming parts of those. We're also working with the Tiverton District Lions Club June 23rd and 24th for their summer kickoff event. June 23rd, we will be hosting a movie night, and the 24th, the Family Fun Farm, including farm-based inflatables and a rock climbing wall, as well as historic picnic games like a tug of war and sack races. So June is really busy. Our art installation, one of our committee members has met a couple of times with Don, and he's coming along nicely with his work, and looking to install it early in the month of September, and then have an unveiling sometime between the 25th and 29th of September. We just want to work with the location for that to happen. So we do have a recommendation in this report, and we're looking for council to decide whether they would like the art installation, which, just as a reminder, is going to be 3 large pots that Dawn is putting together with 3 different scenes on them, representative of Bruce County and our history. So the committee has recommended that the pots either come here to the Administration Center or to the Bruce County Museum and Cultural Center. So we respectfully ask the Executive Committee to choose one of the 2 options to be the official site for that art installation. Do we want to do that at the end?
I think
Okay, perfect. So just to finish going through our events, we do have Spooky Bruce, October 27th to 29th, and we'll be working with, I think, a variety of partners on that event. And we're still looking for pieces to put within our time capsule. We've actually come up with, we have a suitcase and a small travel bag that we're going to put everything into for that. It looks like it's coming together nicely, and we'd like those by November 1st if you have items to add to that. So I think that's everything for the report, if we just want to go to the recommendation.
So there is a staff recommendation that we as the executive committee decide on either option 1 or 2. So how would we like to do this? Just a show of hands for option 1 being here at the administrative building. All those in favor of the admin building? 3 and 3. You're fine? Well, we don't want Kathy being angry, and it's a no. Yeah. Comments, maybe some comments. Paul?
Well, as you know, Mr. Warden, I know very little about artwork and things like that, but the museum definitely has more traffic going through it on an annual basis than this building. I think more people would enjoy these pots if it were at the museum.
That's a very good point. Maybe we should have had the discussion before. So, could we travel it around a little bit too, possibly? Like, of all the things we have to decide today, we get stuck in. Mike?
Take your vote again. Well, why don't we share it then? Why don't we share it, say half here and half there, there. For
Kelly?
2017.
Through you, Mr. Warden, we may be able to do that. We're just a little uncertain about weight of how heavy it's going to be, but if it's possible, we would bring that back and make that recommendation.
We just want everybody to be happy, Kathy. So the recommendation is we'll do option 1 and 2, and maybe move it back and forth a little bit. And if we find it's a little too cumbersome, maybe at that point we'll decide that. And yeah, obviously I think that's a good point, that the museum does see a lot more traffic, fair enough. And maybe a focal point for some people to go to, but I think if it's okay, that let's go with both for a little bit and see how it goes.
So
Kelly?
through you, Mr. Warden, then we'll start with the museum.
Yes.
Okay.
And it could end up just staying there too. So, All those in favor of that recommendation? Okay, that's carried.
Thank you
Isn't
very
that
much.
easy? All right. Musical chairs, yeah. So Tracy's here for corporate services. So I guess we're down to close. Okay, our next item of business is to move into closed session, that the committee move into a closed meeting pursuant to section 239(2)B, personal matters about an identified individual, including municipal or local board employees, and section 239(3)(1) of the Municipal Act for the purpose of educating or training the members. Do I have a mover and seconder to go into closed? John and Robert, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.